Ben, the founder of Prodify, a large product consultancy, also former chief product officer at Whoop, which Sid's a big fan
I
here.
love it.
Nice. Love it.
I've never seen Sid without his Whoop,
Yes.
so we thank you for all the work you did there. And then we all just got together and gave you a personalized demo of Blitzy. So just curious, what'd you think?
It was fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
what an amazing platform, right? You guys have built something that I think is really exciting because it can just put things out there so much faster, right?
Yeah.
Higher quality code, something that's delivered much more rapidly than a lot of companies might be used to. And from a product management standpoint, it's kind of like a dream come true.
Yeah, and we were just talking earlier about like, what does this actually mean for product managers inside of companies? And you and your team spend time with these product managers all day, every day. So curious what kind of conversations you're having about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think about a Blitzy platform, which has this ability to author, a prompt, to have it generate a PRD, to have that PRD generate a technical spec, have that technical spec ultimately generate code. The fact that all that kind of stuff can be done overnight, between the time that you're leaving the office and the engineers are showing up the next day, really means that you can speed up that iterative process. And that's just such an important part of the product management job, is making sure that you can iterate with the engineering team really quickly, that you can put something out there in terms of what you want to see in the product, have it get developed, have it be turned around, respond to it, give feedback on it, put it out there sometimes even in production and see how it tests out in the wild. It just sort of really accelerates the whole way in which product managers can be thinking about products. So I think that's fantastic in terms of the Blitzy platform and its application, but I would even go further and say even more broadly around AI and the capabilities around AI. It's going to have this really transformative effect for product managers. And there's a lot of product managers out there that are afraid that it's going to be so impactful that their job is going to go away. I don't buy into that for what it's worth, and we could probably talk about that as well.
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be a radical transformation for a lot of product managers out there.
Yeah, and you get to sit on the engineering side working with a product person with Blitzy in the center. So curious, like with Blitzy as an internal case study of somebody that is a power user of our own technology, like how do you think this changes the relationship between Eng and the internal product manager?
Well, I think there's historically been a lot of tension. There always is when you build products between product and Eng. There is, we build stuff, you tell us to build stuff, and then the client comes and tells you that this needs to change, and you're like, great. And then it comes back to engineering, and we have to change a bunch of stuff. And that is like a tension all the time, but the product managers really are the ones that are the liaison in between, trying to make sure that requirements fit in and it's a smooth transition. So it's been pretty hard, as we were chatting about earlier, where you got to move much more slower. You have to think about the framework, the parties involved, and how much time it takes. Mm-hmm. And when you want to make changes, you're always queuing up those changes for engineering, right? So if you want something in the UI to change today, engineering has 20 other things that you told them to do before. Yeah. And you're just going to queue it up, and you're going to see so from request to effect in production is about 2 months. But that is something fundamentally that changes with tools like Blitzy in the mix, because you can ask for it and have it delivered the next day. Mm-hmm. So that is, I think, one area where we're going to see tensions eased. And there are multiple other places where, engineering, the initial reaction of engineering to a request, feature request, is let us evaluate it. It's always defensive. Can you do this? Maybe. Let us think about it, right? But with AI, it changes a little bit, because you can get the yes/no answer right away from the chatbots, even from a system one response. Yeah. But with what we do differently with Blitzy is that we'll not just tell you if that's just that is a good change for you. We'll plan it out. We'll do a lot of system two, and we'll see how it fits into your existing tech stack, right? So being able to do things like that instantly is going to cut down roadmaps from 6 months to like weeks.
Right. Curious your perspective, I would say, from the field, right? Because you, any one time, you have a few dozen PMs and CEOs that are under the purview of Prodify's coaching, consulting, and strategic services. What are the reactions right now from the PMs on the ground to a lot of these onslaught of AI tools that they have to sort of sort through and filter out what makes sense?
Onslaught is probably the right word. I think a lot of them are a little bit overwhelmed with the number of new technologies that are emerging and the kinds of things that they're being told from every blog post they read that they're supposed to be using tomorrow. So there's a proliferation of these different kinds of tools. The intent is it's supposed to make product managers more effective at what they do. But I think there's a lot of PMs who are looking at this and they're like, well, when do I even have time to test these things out, to see which kinds of things are going to work for me, et cetera. And I think that companies that are going to be most effective at applying AI to accelerate product development with tools like Blitzy, but also in ways that product managers can just kind of use AI technology to facilitate the work that they've always been responsible for. If you can think about how you can tackle it on maybe 3 different fronts, I think that's the way that companies should be looking at that. So the first of those would be, how does it make them more efficient? How do you deliver the same things you've been delivering before, but just do so at a much faster pace? So help me write that email. Help me deliver this presentation. Help me write the user stories that are necessary to feed over to the engineering team, right? So that's kind of like part one. But I think a lot of people are thinking too small in that regard, and they're just kind of thinking that's all what it's all about.
Right.
And the reality is AI can have a really big impact on the quality of what's getting delivered as well. So poke holes in this product strategy. Tell me how a competitor might react if we did this. What would they do, and how might we adjust as a result of that, right? So you can kind of think about, how do I make this better? If I've got a test plan, what are the edge cases that I haven't been thinking about so far that I need to start thinking about as part of this as well? So you can not only use AI to become more efficient with your tasks, but you can also do it to sort of optimize or improve upon the quality of those things that are being delivered. But the thing that I'm most excited about is these things that sort of like eliminate or sort of like turn upside down some of the work that product managers have had to do historically. Because if you question why these things were even happening, it's like they were happening because AI wasn't there.
Right.
So a good example of this might be personas, right? Like product managers generate personas. They work with user experience designers to create them. They work with marketing on how they're going to apply those things when it comes to marketing rhetoric and what the user experience is going to look like and so on. But a persona has always been kind of like a crappy deliverable, basically, right? It's a slide that has a picture of a person and it describes them in some way. And then it's supposed to be up to the product manager and the UX designer to look at this persona and say, okay, let me just try to guess how this person would react to this particular kind of like feature. Well, you could certainly make it more efficient to generate personas by consuming more data and feeding it into an AI system to help kind of identify what the personas would be. You could look at more data sources and take things like, let's say, customer support logs and stuff like that to make the personas better than what they have been, kind of like the first 2 categories that we were talking about. But you also could say, well, why is a persona even a slide in the first place?
Right.
If the whole point is for me to think about how this user might interact with this product, why don't you instead take all of that input for the persona, turn that into a chatbot, and now you can actually chat with your personas back and forth, right? Or it can give you guidance as to the kinds of questions that you should ask real life users that match that persona to embellish things that maybe the AI doesn't have enough context on. So, if you think about what a persona is really there for and what it's all about, it's like a good example to me of how you can both get more efficient, how you can also do better work, but also how you can sort of like throw away the old way of looking at this and completely take like a new path, a new way of doing product management. So it's going to be transformative in all these ways, but all these are still inputs into a product manager to make good decisions. So I think what you're actually going to see is the best product managers becoming even more valuable because they have all these tools that they can use. But you're not going to need as many product managers as maybe you had before. But the whole idea that product manager is going to go away is a little bit of a joke.
Totally.
I actually have 2 additional things to say on that. And you mentioned the idea that product managers are going to go away is a joke. I would in fact say that product managers are going to be even more important as AI becomes more prominent. And I'll tell you why specifically. One, if you go to Claude today or any AI tool of your choice, and if you ask it for something, let's say you ask it to build a website, which there are a lot of website builders out there that do that, it's going to layer in a bunch of assumptions. And those assumptions are going to be based on patterns that it has seen before. But the more specific you are with what you want, the better a job it can do to give you what exactly you want. And what do product managers do inherently, right? With the user stories and the specs, they help you define what you want. So as long as the transformer architecture dominates, for the next 5 or 10 years, we are going to need product management even more to be more specific.
Right.
The other inherent challenge with these models is they have a tendency to agree and to give the user exactly what they want. The problem with that is the users quite often want something that's wrong. This is wrong. That's not the right way to do it, right? And they realize that after they see the first few versions of the product, and if that's how you build things, you're going to be really slow. You're always going to be dissatisfied with your product. But if you have a product manager that's consultative and that's helping you, that has built these products in the past, that has seen many more features, use cases, solutions similar to what you're building, they're able to be consultative earlier on in the process and help you build it correctly the first time. And that, I think, is a key factor in building successful products.
Yeah, I can see that playing out. I mean, the analogy that I've used when I think about AI is, look, let's go back in time when the calculator was invented. I'm sure everyone was out there freaking out like, oh my God, what's going to happen to accountants? They're all going to go away. And it's like, we all still have accountants today. And that's after the calculator, that's after Excel, that's after Google Sheets, that's after, TurboTax. It doesn't matter. Like, all these things are still there, and yet we still have accountants. And what it's really done is it's elevated the role of accounting from what used to be doing math by hand on a piece of paper, with using a slide rule or something like that, right? And now the best accountants are that much better than they ever could have been because they're not bogged down with this work that was automatable. And I think you see the same kind of thing happening within product management as well.
That's right. I love your example of the persona, right? Because it's something that we do here. And so I love to ask like AI native companies, like, how are you using AI in your non-core way to deliver value? And so we take our LinkedIn profiles of our best customers and transcripts of our calls, and we dump them into our persona GPT, and then we have it like criticize our website. And so,
yeah, exactly.
And, it's pretty good. Yeah, it's very opinionated. But I'm curious, what other sort of like AI native approaches, really like on the tactical level, have you seen from these product thinkers? Because I think that's like really easy for folks to sort of implement right away.
Yeah. I was bashing chatbots, in a prior conversation about, not people are thinking that AI equals chatbot, and obviously it's so much broader than that. But I do think that there are some really interesting implementations of chatbots as well. I've heard things where product leaders who are unavailable to meet with their team all the time can feed in some of their own beliefs or principles for how decisions should be made within the team, et cetera, and people on the team can actually chat with like their manager.
It's very good for the absence leader.
To get feedback and things like that. But I got to say, it's not a substitute for having the real conversation.
Totally,
the same kind of thing with like a persona chatbot. I would never say use that instead of talking to customers. But you can't be talking to customers all the time, right? And if you have an ability to sort of infer, let's say, 80% truth from these kinds of things, sometimes 80% is all you need. Or you say, hey, I want you to poke holes in the work that I've been doing here. Make this better for me. And if you can kind of like train these interactive tools to then essentially be co-pilots for product managers to help them do the work that they need to do on a daily basis, that can be a really effective kind of like strategy. So I've seen a lot of companies starting to build these sort of like fine-tuned models, or building in the right kinds of prompts and things like that, so that product managers as a team can interact, sometimes even with one another, by sort of like sharing or disputing different ideas. And sometimes it's through that challenging of different ideas or that merging of different ideas that new innovations really start to arise.
So there's building with AI, there's using AI as an assistant in new ways to sort of critique and build, and then there's building AI into your product, right? Which I imagine has started to become a significant amount of the product and strategic consulting at Prodify. So talk to me about what are the key use cases people are trying to build into their products, and tell me about something that you maybe disagree with that's become consensus.
What are people tending to do is very different than a lot of the things that we would recommend.
Well, I guess that's why they hire you.
Yeah, sure. So, the things that they tend to think about is the chatbot integration. Hey, I see that there's ChatGPT over here. What if people could sort of ask questions about my product as they're using it, and maybe I can feed it a little bit of context? And it's not a bad idea. Go ahead and do that, I guess. But if you think that that's the end all be all of how AI can actually affect your product, you're probably thinking way too small about that as well. So there's a few different categories that are out there. I think one of them is, instead of thinking about chatbot in sort of like the very basic function, think of it instead as an abstracted level, which is there is some context that is available for that particular user in that scenario. Maybe you have a backstory on how long they've been using the product, what data they've been putting in for these different entities that they're managing and things like that. There could be the way that they've used the user experience. There could be the feature set that they have or have not used so far. And if you can take all of that sort of context and feed that into a better user experience, and you think about that in a more abstracted level, yes, a chatbot would be one way of doing that, but what are all the better ways of doing that? So for example, could you have progressive disclosure of features, be smarter progressive disclosure that's actually one-to-one personalized for each individual user, right? Could you make it that you could talk about features by contextualizing them and describing them given the use case that the customer has? So for example, if I'm using Photoshop and there's all this whole array of different tools and little buttons and things like that that are out there, if I could look at the kind of image that I'm trying to work with, that I'm trying to manipulate, and you can say, oh, this is a painting. Well, in the context of a painting, this tool is really valuable for doing this thing within a painting. Oh, it's actually a photograph. Well, this tool is really valuable in order to remove blemishes. Well, you wouldn't want to describe the removal of blemishes when you're talking about a painting in the first place, because that doesn't really make sense. So if you can describe these different things in the way that makes the most sense for the user, given the context that you have, that's an application of AI that can really improve the overall value delivery of the sort of like features that you already have to the user base, to make sure that they better understand how they can use them, when they can use them, et cetera. Let's take a Whoop example, right? So, you have all this data that's being collected on your body, you have understanding of that data, and you can go dive really deeply into the data. But unless you're prepared to take a lot of time to do so, you might want to have those insights that are most valuable surface to you, right? To say, hey, we've seen the impact of alcohol on your sleep. Therefore, we recommend that you don't drink. But what we've also noticed is that you're drinking alcohol in the same times that you're also hanging out with friends, and hanging out with friends is actually helpful for you. In order to tease these two things apart a little bit better, we would need to have some days where you either did one or didn't do the other, et cetera. So now you can sort of imagine how Whoop could be guiding you towards how you could learn more about your body, how you could learn more about how to optimize your overall performance. And that is a pretty game-changing kind of thing that no other product like that could potentially provide. So it's not just about a chatbot, right? It's about ways of showcasing the features that you already have to maximize the value that your customers are experiencing from the product.
I love that. Yeah, dynamic UX UI, which is the technology is actually all here to do that today. It's just about the engineering implementation, which it's easier for us to say. What do you think is going to happen with dynamic UI? Our friends at Flybridge love this category. So curious your perspective, since you're a little deeper on the implementation side here.
I think we're getting better with images. So the latest O1, for example, it's really good. It's much better than any model we've seen so far in terms of recognizing things in images. For example, you take a picture, you're going somewhere, you take a picture, you want to identify a flower, right? Or you want to identify the make and model of a vehicle. It is very good at telling you that. The reason I bring that up is if you think of how we perceive interfaces, they're ultimately images, they're visual to us. And personally at Blitzy, what we're doing is we've unlocked the ability to go from images to interfaces. So you can draw interfaces, you can bring your own Figma that you've implemented, maybe a picture or a screenshot of how you want it to look, and we can build the UI for you. That is one example of where this space is evolving. But part of this is also code generation. And we've seen, for example, the latest Claude top some of the leaderboards that have historically been very hard to conquer. And even O1 is a lot better model at coding. So when you combine these two items, you're going to get interfaces that really pop and that are designed to do exactly what the user wants. You think of something, you draw it, maybe you design it in Figma, you're going to get exactly that interface, which is actually really hard. I really want to take a moment to underscore that, because this thing, I was a front-end engineer for a significant part of my career. And this thing of perfecting user interfaces, there are people with actual full-time jobs that are focused on ensuring that this happens. At NVIDIA, we had visual designers. They were super rare. They were very hard to hire for. And their job was to take pixel rulers and to check pixel accuracy on all of these UIs.
Wow.
So that's how intensive this job is. And the ability to automate that and get that done overnight is game-changing.
It reminds me what you're talking about with user interfaces, about this other big change that I see happening that's going to be stemming from AI.
Yeah.
It's not just the interfaces themselves, but even the use cases that are supported. Take Google Calendar, right? I mean, if I wanted to clear my calendar for tomorrow afternoon because I just needed some time to think, what are all the things that I would have to do? I would have to go look at my calendar. Well, that's one use case. I would need to identify the overlapping meetings with this window. That's another use case. I would need to find out who I'm meeting with, and I would have to cancel the meeting on them or try to email them to try to find out another time that they could meet instead, right? And it's like it goes on and on and on with all these button presses that I would have to make in this very kind of like rigid UI, right? And I think that that's something that's going to change really dramatically. If I can instead say, hey, I need to clear my calendar tomorrow afternoon, and the app can figure out all the things that need to happen. Okay, great. Well, these are the meetings that need to be, moved. The afternoon could mean either 1 to 3 p.m. or it could mean 3 to 5 p.m. It's easier to make that happen in 1 to 3 than it is from 3 to 5 because it's only 2 meetings that need to be moved instead of 3. And when I look at their calendars, they actually do have availability to meet with you early in the morning instead, and to sort of like be so smart in thinking through these things so that I don't have to. That's a completely new kind of use case, but you think about a calendar app moving and elevating itself to being and operating more like an EA, you're going to start to see more and more of that kind of thing happening. And I think what will happen is the interfaces that we're used to today, where you have to do all these button presses, but you're also very precise and you get to do it exactly that way. That's going to be like today's normal interface is going to be tomorrow's advanced mode, right? But the normal way that people will be using products will be to interact with it in this more fuzzy way of saying, hey, look, just here's the thing that I need to have happen. Find a way to make that happen, right? That's going to be really interesting to me as well.
And that use case has kind of 2 facets. One is a system that understands bad, right? Like understands like, by clear my afternoon between 1 and 3 and 3 to 5, I don't want you to clear the 5 o'clock dinner with my wife. That's not what I meant, right? That's important to Ben. And I have access to all Ben's emails and correspondence. I know you just not want to clear that one off, so I'm going to choose 1 and 3. So it's understanding the user and sort of what's important to them. And then it's sort of multi-agent action, as in I'm going to check, I'm going to cancel, I'm going to email. And so maybe you can talk about like where we're at on the path to this sort of like abstract personal assistant level.
Yeah, I'd like to dig deeper on why this makes sense for multi-agents, right? If you think about how the transform architecture works, it's token completion, right? It's sequence to sequence model. So when you have a request, like, hey, clear that meeting, right? And that request is broken down into steps. And this particular agent only has to think about one step, like, hey, let me find the meetings that I can clear. That allows the model to focus on the specific pattern that it has learned, the ability to find things, right? These are generalist models. They can do a variety of tasks, but they are not necessarily good at all of the tasks that they do.
Right.
So when you have it specialize and when you give it specific instructions to specialize on one set of tasks, it is able to refer back in its memory to a high quality area. So for example, there's variability in all the data, right? There's high quality data on some of the best websites, like for example, the popular news websites, like Wall Street Journal or ZDNet. And there's also the blog sites. That's not to say the blog sites are all crap. There are really good blogs out there, but there are just someone's random thoughts captured on the internet. Would you want your system to be working off of that? No, right? You want the best quality to be reflected in all of your outcomes. And that is why focusing the energies or focusing the agent's capacities or skills on a particular set of tasks is important. When you do that, you unlock that quality. And then that's where you bring in multiple agents specialized in different tasks. And then your focus becomes how do you coordinate this workflow so that it feels like one action. And that's the next frontier in this. We talked about multi-agent and we talked about reasoning. The gaps in system 1 and multi-agent is that there can be mistakes, right? The moment you introduce multi-agents into the system, there's the ability for drop-offs. There's the ability for the information to get translated. If you remember the meme from the movie Madagascar, where the guy at the top says something, and by the time it reaches the bottom,
Sid as a 3-year-old, by the way.
So Madagascar is important for me as my 3-year-old. But that's what agents are like. They're like monkeys. They're not super intelligent. They're not these beings. It's just AI. It's not AGI, right?
Right.
So because you're introducing gaps into the system, the ability to also couple that with reasoning, wherein you take the instructions, you think about it. Maybe the first agent thinks about it and the second agent reviews it and then comes up with it. And that is essentially how reasoning AI works. It's widely held that even O1, OpenAI's most popular model, is actually GPT-4o with reasoning built in and the ability to do more tokens. So reasoning and multi-agent frameworks are where the future is, and combined, I think they're going to unlock really high-quality experiences, including even the ability to add customized user interfaces. Like the way we build UI today is around the idea that I have a component library, I have a set of colors, I have a theme system, right, and have, for example, drop-downs, right? So I want to fit that experience within, let's say, some text that I have. Generative UI is different. It can take the simple components that you have, like drop-downs, dialogues, buttons, pop-ups, and build complex components out of those that you never created before. So where you had designers designing things and checking off text and making sure everything aligns, AI can do that for you.
Right.
So all of these things combined together, you have a very rich experience that saves you a ton of time and does exactly what you want.
Right.
I think 2025 is supposed to be the year of agentic AI. That's sort of like the, that's what the journal, that's what ZDNet's, what everyone's saying. So I'm curious to close it out. One, if Ben, you agree, and two, what does that actually mean to you?
I mean, I do agree, because I think that there's this
It's a safe bet, yeah.
very simple kind of like connective tissue like we're talking about. I mean, it's the thing that bridges between saying, I want to clear my calendar in the afternoon and the actual maneuvering of the meetings, the actual sending of the emails, you know, et cetera, right? Like it requires some set of actions to be taken, or at least those actions to be evaluated. And I think you're right that they have to be, you know, determined by some specific kind of like agent that is very narrowly focused on that one particular kind of task. But as you chain those things together, they can become extremely powerful, right? So I think naturally it's going to make sense that from a business standpoint, there will be a lot of motivation to support those kinds of use cases, and the support of those kinds of use cases, which has obviously a lot of value, is therefore going to translate to the need for agentic AI. And we all know that it's possible. It's just a matter of actually stringing these things together in such a way that it really makes sense. So yeah, I 100% see that happening.
And having the product sense to realize that you are eating into the labor portion of the jobs to be done, right? And so I think that's where it's technically now possible, yes, but it's like, what does that mean for your application and the work that this software can do for your business? And that's where I think folks like you and the team at Prodify are particularly well suited to come in and help folks solve that previously unsolved problem, I would say. So
it's a lot of what we're doing these days.
Yeah. Well, where can folks find more about you? Where can they get in touch with you if they're interested in having some support building these agentic systems with some product help?
Yeah, sure. So always try to look up me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect with people there. So just Ben Foster is my handle, very simple. You can also come to the website, prodify.group. That's PRODIFY.group. And there we've got a lot of articles and stories of how we've helped different clients on these kinds of things that might be of direct value. But honestly, the best thing is just talking to us. You know, we love to just pick up the phone, actually have a conversation with people, learn about what they're doing, and we are more than happy to just have a conversation and discuss what's going on with your product and share direct things that you can do to implement some of these kinds of things yourself, to think about things in new ways. And then often from there, as we have one conversation, two conversations, three, sometimes that translates to us working together with some of those companies, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's totally fine too.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're excited to work with you guys on some projects here in the future, and awesome hanging out today, man.
All right, likewise.
Thanks.